After working tirelessly for days to provide for his young family, the man felt a spark of excitement as he boarded the bus home earlier than expected. He imagined the joy on his wife's face when she saw him walk through the door unannounced. The thought of holding his tiny triplets again filled him with warmth. He could already picture their innocent giggles, their little hands reaching out to him, the house alive with love. His heart raced as he turned onto his street, eager for that reunion. But instead of the comforting sounds he longed for, he froze mid-step. Cutting through the silence was a sound so sharp it pierced his chest, the faint but unmistakable cries of infants. At first, he thought he had imagined it, perhaps a neighbor's children. Yet as he drew closer to his house, the cries grew louder, more desperate, echoing in the heavy stillness of the night. His pace quickened, unease rising in his stomach. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He clutched his bag tighter, his breath shallow, his mind racing through possibilities. Why would his children be crying outside? Where was his wife? With every step toward his home, his excitement melted away, replaced by dread. His hands trembled as he approached the gate, each cry pulling him closer to a truth he was not ready to face. The surprise he had planned so carefully was about to become a moment that would change his life forever. He pushed open the gate with urgency, his heart pounding louder than the storm that had begun to drizzle overhead. The sight before him brought his world crashing down. There, on the wet ground, were his 3 tiny infants, his triplets, huddled together, their clothes soaked, their small bodies shivering from the cold rain. Their little faces were red from crying, their arms reaching out as if begging to be saved. For a moment, he stood frozen, disbelief tightening around his chest. How could this be real? How could a mother walk away from such fragile souls? His eyes darted around, searching desperately for his wife, for any sign that this was a mistake, that she would appear any second, holding a blanket, rushing to gather the babies. But the silence around him confirmed the unthinkable. She was gone. She had left him, without a trace. A flood of emotions crashed over him, shock, anger, grief, and an overwhelming ache of helplessness. His legs gave way, and he dropped to his knees in the mud, gathering the shivering children into his arms. The rain drenched his back, but he pressed them close to his chest, shielding them with his body, whispering words of comfort through tears he could no longer hold back. In that heartbreaking moment, one truth burned brighter than his pain: he could not give in to despair. These children had only him now, and no matter the cost, he would never abandon them. Clutching the 3 tiny bodies against his chest, he stumbled into the small house, dripping with rain and fear. He laid the babies gently on the old couch, wrapping them with his own jacket, trying to quiet their sobs. Their cries echoed in the silence, piercing his heart with every sound. He searched the cupboards desperately for anything, warm milk, dry clothes, even a blanket, but the shelves were nearly bare, a cruel reminder of how much he had been sacrificing to keep his family afloat. He sat beside them, his hands trembling as he tried to comfort all 3 at once. His mind was torn apart by questions. How will I feed them? How will I raise them alone? The weight of responsibility pressed so heavily that for a moment he felt his spirit breaking. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered apologies to the babies, feeling he had already failed them. But then, as if fate had spoken, one of the triplets stopped crying. Tiny fingers curled around his hand, gripping with surprising strength. He stared at that fragile grasp, and something shifted inside him. The fear, though still heavy, was met with a fierce determination. These children needed him, not tomorrow, not later, but now. He wiped his face, pulling them closer, a fire sparking in his chest. He might be alone, but he would not give up. His love for them would be stronger than his fear, and that love would keep them alive. By morning, the story of the man and his abandoned triplets had spread through the neighborhood. At first, he felt only shame, fearing the whispers behind closed doors. But when he stepped outside, carrying the babies bundled in worn blankets, something unexpected happened. An elderly neighbor approached with tears in her eyes and placed a warm quilt in his arms. "They shouldn't be cold," she said softly. Moments later, another neighbor came with bottles of milk, followed by a young mother offering baby clothes her own child had outgrown. The man stood speechless, his throat tight with emotion. All his life he had carried burdens alone, believing no one would understand his struggles. Yet here they were, people he barely knew, people with little of their own, sharing what they had to keep his children safe. Even strangers from nearby streets arrived, drawn by compassion, each bringing something: food, medicine, words of encouragement. With every act of kindness, the weight on his shoulders grew lighter. The house that had felt so empty the night before now filled with warmth, the cries of his babies mixing with the gentle voices of people who cared. He realized he wasn't truly alone. Kindness had a way of multiplying when most needed. Looking around at the outstretched hands and open hearts, he felt a hope he hadn't known in years. His children, once left in the cold, were now surrounded by a village ready to lift them into love. Days later, as the sun broke through the clouds and poured its golden light into the small home, the man sat quietly watching his triplets sleep. Their tiny chests rose and fell in peaceful rhythm, their faces calm, no longer marked by the fear and hunger of that terrible night. Around them were blankets, clothes, and little toys, gifts from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had come forward when he needed it most. What had once felt like an unbearable burden had transformed into a blessing wrapped in community and love. He gently brushed a strand of hair from one baby's forehead and whispered, "You'll never feel unloved again, I promise." His voice broke, but not from despair, this time from gratitude. Though their mother had walked away, the world had stepped in, proving that compassion still had the power to heal. As he looked out the window, he no longer saw judgment in the faces of those passing by. Instead, he saw nods of respect, eyes softened with empathy, and smiles that reminded him he wasn't fighting this battle alone. The man felt stronger than he ever had, not because life had become easier, but because love, his own and that of others, was now guiding every step forward. In that moment, he understood, family is not always defined by who stays or who leaves, but by those who choose to love. And surrounded by kindness, his triplets would grow up never doubting they were wanted, cherished, and home.